We are excited about this piece of legislation, the Tennessee Tuesday Act, which would make Tennessee the first presidential primary in the nation in 2024. We felt like this was a necessary piece of legislation for many reasons. This year has really made the case for other states being allowed to go first. Feel very strongly that Tennessee, in many ways, the way it would better represent the nation as a whole, demographically, and for other reasons, would be an ideal place to hold the first primary in the country. As we've seen, there have been a lot of problems in Iowa. They're still trying to resolve. There's been problems with Iowa in the past. There have been issues in other states that have gone first. And so I firmly believe that no state should have a monopoly on this very important process. And that's why the Tennessee Tuesday Act would make the state of Tennessee, in our code, the first state to go and hold our election on the first Tuesday after New Year's in 2024. And with that, I'll pass it off to Senator Hackberry. Might have other comments too.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, the bottom line is this. Iowa and New Hampshire are not states that represent the demographics of America. And beyond that, even logistically, they cannot seem to get it together. The presidential primary is too important, and it is something that should have diverse input. And Tennessee is certainly more diverse than Iowa or New Hampshire. I think also that, you know, we have something to say in our primary elections, and there's no reason for us to wait until March. I think starting in January, being the first in the nation will really be a big benefit to Tennessee, and will make sure that our issues and concerns really are addressed by those seeking the highest office.
Sure. And I'll add that, you know, certainly being one of the earliest states, we would get a lot more attention in 2024 from presidential candidates who are seeking nomination, whether it be Republican or Democratic nomination in 2024. I can assure you, I personally have worked in the Iowa caucuses back in 2004. I know the senator has been to Iowa just this past year. I'm familiar with New Hampshire. I've campaigned. I've been involved in campaigning up in New Hampshire presidential level. And the amount of influence that those states have because they go first is truly incredible. And so if Tennessee was the first state, we would have a much greater presence from those who are seeking the highest office in the nation. We'd have their time, their campaign workers, their money being spent here in our state, and would help us as a whole to elevate the importance of Tennessee. Yes.
So you mentioned problems with Iowa in the past, certainly this year. Why do you think Tennessee is better equipped to handle a primary that early and not have those same issues?
One of the key things, obviously, is we're a primary. So I think, you know, you saw issues with the caucus, and that you saw in Iowa. I'm hearing already there's some concern about other caucuses that are taking place. You know, we need to make sure that as a state that we're prepared for this, and you know, I feel very confident in our abilities as a state to participate in this process with fairness and openness, and to be a strong presence nationally in 2024.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of what he said, we already have a primary. We're just talking about moving the date up. So I think the same infrastructure that's in place would apply. Certainly, we want to make sure we're ready, but I don't think, unlike the caucus system where it's a lot more complicated, we're just a straight up vote. So,
how much sign-up have you guys talked with the DNC about this?
You know, I haven't really had much communication with the DNC. I think the DNC is dealing with enough of their own issues right now. I realize there are these like kind of party rules that exist with the different parties. But I think as state lawmakers, we recognize, and we've heard there's a movement amongst other states to look at this as well, to say, what can we do as state lawmakers? And we're hearing from our constituents to say, why, when we go to vote, are we voting in March? You know, and I encourage everybody to vote. I hope everybody votes in the upcoming, you know, presidential primaries here in the state. But sadly, a lot of the candidates who will appear on that ballot are no longer running. they've already dropped out of the race, and we didn't. Some Tennesseans liked some of those candidates, and we didn't have a say in that. Especially some minority candidates who I think were very strong, but they just couldn't make it through Iowa and New Hampshire, and some of them have been very vocal about that.
In 2008, Michigan and Florida moved up their primaries into January, and the DNC basically refused, well, there was a big fight over whether or not they could seat their delegates, and it basically cut it in half. Are you guys willing to take that chance if you move it ahead and maybe not be, Tennessee's delegates might not be seated?
Well, see, in those situations, I think there was an active conversation with the DNC, and they continued to proceed against DNC rules. Those particular rules, the rules for 2024 haven't even been established yet. So I don't think that that's something that our state party or even us as legislators would push to go against DNC rules, because ultimately we want to make sure our voices are heard. We're not trying to diminish anything where we would not be able to have delegates present, or there would be this negotiation where half of our delegates would be seated.
The proposed date is January 2nd. That's really close to the holiday season. In a state where we have such a low voter turnout, I mean, don't you think there's going to be less people voting during that time when they might be on vacation or whatnot?
So one of the reasons for that is because New Hampshire has in their state law the ability to let their Secretary of State move up their primary week. And so looking at it, that was sort of a decision we made to say, okay, well, we'll move it to basically the earliest we think we can have it in 2024. New Hampshire wants to have it in 2023. That's a decision they would have to make. I will say, and the Senator and I have both encouraged this, is people to vote early. And so we do have early voting in the state, and that's one thing. Some of these other states do not have early voting. So I think that people are busy over the holidays, but also people have time off a lot of times, and so that will something they'll have to factor in. But ultimately, I know this: Tennesseans care a lot about participating in democracy. They care a lot about decisions that are made for the office of presidency, and we want to see our role increased. Currently, it's being diminished, and we want our voices to be heard. And we think this is a great step to make us first.
Some of the other states, we talk about the diversity of the candidates, but some of the other states, they talk about the diversity of the populations voting. Is Tennessee diverse enough to be one of the first ones to have that say?
Well, I certainly think that we're more diverse than Iowa and New Hampshire. I know that there are other states on Super Tuesday states that have kind of talked about it. I have some colleagues in Georgia who are interested as well. So we'll see. But I certainly think where we are positioned, having our 3 grand divisions, rural and urban, our population, our demographic population, I think that we make a good case. Are we the most diverse state in the nation? Certainly not. But we certainly are much more diverse than Iowa or New Hampshire, which has their population just truly is not representative of the rest of the country.
Going back to the previous question about timing, so you all don't anticipate that this will be a situation where it keeps getting moved back, so we stay first, and then we're all voting in July 2023,
Well, that's the plan. I'm kidding. I mean, that's not our intention. Okay, so certainly Representative Powell can speak more to it if he'd like, but that's not our intention. We want it to be first in January. The other, we're not going to keep having this as a moving target, unlike how some of these other states have their laws built in place now where they really can move it back. And I will say also about the holiday question, we want voting to be looked at as a holiday. Some countries, it is a national holiday, which is totally awesome. They have a lot more participation than we do. So any way that we can make this exciting and connected with, it's the beginning of the year, you get to choose your new leader. I think it's a cool thing.
Do you all have any support from Republicans?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we'll see. I've talked to some of my colleagues about this idea, and they think it's very interesting. We see this as a bipartisan measure because ultimately this will affect both parties. Regardless of what happens this year on the Democratic side and moving forward in the general election, one thing we do know is 2024 you're going to have an open Republican presidential primary. So if I were the Republicans, I would really applaud this piece of legislation because this is going to make Tennessee the center of the presidential political universe if it became law and we were the first primary state. And so I think my colleagues on their side of the aisle would welcome this piece of legislation to raise our importance, because we know that they're for sure going to have an open presidential primary.
Yeah. I haven't had any discussions with anyone, but like Representative Powell said, obviously I think that there is room for bipartisan buy-in. If I was on the Republican side, I would be jumping at this because Tennessee is such a red state, so why not be able to be really influential when it comes down to the presidential primary? But I'm not a Republican, just to clarify.
Does this have the support of the Tennessee Democratic Party?
You'd have to ask them. So I know they, didn't necessarily have lengthy conversations with them about this piece of legislation or deal with them. To me, I'm a state lawmaker. I have a lot of constituents and voters and people, not just in my district, but throughout the state, have said we're sick and tired of not being included in this process. And we go into the ballot box. A lot of the people that we were for are no longer running. Please do something to move us up, to elevate us in this process. And I said, okay, I'm happy to do that and take a look at it. Obviously, when we had these problems that occurred in Iowa, then that raised the importance of this piece of legislation.
Just to clarify, so have you all talked to the Democratic Party about this, or the state Democratic Party?
I've had conversations with the party chair. I've had conversations with some members of the executive committee, but you need to talk to them about their sort of take or feedback on the bill.
Yeah, likewise. But I think, like Representative Powell said, we have constituents that are concerned. And so if nothing else, we are going to elevate their voices. Obviously, as things move forward, it will be a continued conversation with all stakeholders that are going to be impacted to get input. I think that's how you make great legislation, but also understanding that it's about compromise. And we see something totally different as legislators who are directly in contact with our constituents than as someone who might be in party politics. So it has to kind of come together as one.
Yeah. And that's very well stated. And just as the senator said, I mean, I do care what the Tennessee Democratic Party cares. I do care what the national, obviously the DNC thinks about the legislation. But ultimately, what I care most about is what my constituents and what Tennesseans want as a whole, and that's to go earlier in this process and have their voices heard when it comes to choosing our next president.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody take a picture of the logo. I'll spend good money on that. Still. Spend good money on that. Just
I was not represented, so I'm looking to see what Nevada and South Carolina will yield. 99.9% back from here. Not had a chance to vote. 99.8% Hispanic Americans, and it's certainly not a chance to vote. So I'm still optimistic and hopeful, but I think he is the best candidate. Obviously, we'll see what happens, but yes, still very much in support.
Thank you.